So we'll get started as soon as we can here, but I'm still listed as just a participant and not a panelist, so connecting with the WebEx folks is giving us a stall. So as soon as that gets taken care of, we can probably get started. All right. Hello, everybody. Douglas, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Martin. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. All right, so I think we're in good shape where we're connecting between those of us here in the boardroom, which includes committee members, Karen Carter and Roxy Cash. Ms. Kushner and Chair Sutton are also here, as is Superintendent Moore. Let's see, looking through the participant list, Ms. Scott is online, and that's the only other board members that I see at this time. But we do have a quorum of the Facilities Committee. So with that, we will call this meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today we're going to, as you see in the agenda, continue to look at the rubric prioritization. We're going to see the results of that prioritization to help with moving forward with the capital planning process. Then we'll look at the cost model and look at the schematic design for Fuquay-Varina Middle School and Hilltop-Needmore Elementary School. Mr. Cognan has asked that we change the order and look at Fuquay-Varina Middle School first, so just a minor change to the agenda. So assuming nobody has a problem with that, we will go forward with the agenda as planned. All right, so the first item of business is looking at the minutes from the February 10th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 10th meeting?
Dr. Martin, I make a motion we approve those minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. Thank you. All right, Douglas, let me hand it over to you for the presentation about the rubric prioritization and the results thereof.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to Superintendent Moore, to Dr. Martin, Chair Martin, and Vice Chair Haggerty, and fellow committee members and staff. We thank you for the opportunity to meet with you this afternoon. Just waiting. Sharon, I need you to give me the ball so that I can share my screen, please. Thank you, Sharon. And I'm looking for my deck. Apologies, I'm just trying to pull this up. No, the wrong one, I apologize. Trying to pull up the slide deck. Trying to pull this up, I apologize, it's not coming up.
And we all laugh and think that
We
this
do
is
have
sort
it.
of unique to the virtual world, but
Yeah.
it happens at conferences.
These are real world problems that happen.
Yeah.
I'm
That's right.
We do
We're
all
good.
have it in front of us as well. So.
Douglas, why don't you do this? Can you pull the deck up for yourself? I think the board members all have it, and if you start while you're doing that, I'll pull it up
Certainly.
and see if I can share it.
Thank you all.
Sharon, if you would give me the ball.
Okay, so everybody has that deck in front of them. Again, thank you all. Presentation, here are our goals this afternoon. Previous meeting on February 10th, we presented the revised prioritization rubric to you all. We had robust question and answer and feedback. We thank you for that. And in response to your comments, we'll be discussing that. We'll be talking about a recommendation to revise the rubric weighting as a result of that comment. And then we'll talk about the data that we have for you this afternoon for the top 25 for the 2021 test. And then from there, certainly take any questions, comments, or feedback. So presently on slide number 3 right now, which is our rubric feedback. At our February 10th meeting, we heard a question from you all. As the rubric was currently weighted, was it working as intended to identify and provide us with the top 25 schools in greatest need of physical renovation? We took that question back to our CIP team. We met as a team and we went through each part and piece of that formula to determine what we would believe would be the appropriate recommended solution. Coming out of that meeting, as you know, there are 4 components to the formula. You have the FCI, which is the Facility Condition Index. You have health and safety, you have school choice, and you have educational adequacy. And what we were seeing was that FCI, of course, is our anchor. It has the highest percentage. Educational adequacy is not impacting the scores. And as a result, health and safety and school choice were driving the top of that list. We spoke with the team, and the owner of those 2 categories, school choice, of course, was Wade Martin, and educational adequacy was Elizabeth Sharp. After much discussion, they agreed to propose reducing their weighting, the result being to increase the weighting of the building condition and the health and safety. That takes us to slide 4, which shows you again these 4 categories that I've just alluded to: campus building condition, the health and safety, school choice, and the educational adequacy. You'll see 2 percentages in each category. In white, you will see the proposed adjusted percentage, and then immediately below that, in shaded gray with an asterisk, you see the percentage that we reflected in the previous meeting with you in February. And what you'll notice is certainly the higher percentage is allowing campus building condition and health and safety to drive that list.
Dr. Martin, can I ask a quick question here? I won't interrupt anymore, possibly.
No, when we have questions, it's good to get them.
Possibly. So so who decided this? This was a group of who did this, change these percentages?
So this is our CIP team. This is a group of our professionals internally that meet bi-weekly to discuss the progress of the CIP. Part of that agenda that we meet as a group is the prioritization rubric. And people are represented to the departments. So we had conversation to address the comment at the last meeting. And then as a result, we felt these recommended revised percentages would better reflect the ability for the formula to drive the top of the list and identify schools.
So how many people are on the CIP team?
10 to 12.
I'm just saying this because as much as I like campus building condition and health and safety, I'm disappointed to see school choice go from 20 to 15%. Just because I thought that the magnet program was something we were going to really work hard on that. So I just wondered what the thought process that went into that, but I don't know that you can give that to me now. That was just my first concern.
Miss Cash, I do want to let you know, and I can pull up who was on the team, but Wade Martin was one of the individuals on this group.
Who from the magnet program was on it?
Well, Wade represents that. I will have to check.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Ms. Cash, one thing that I will note, and I think the team looked at it because I think we've got a slightly, or at least my observation of it is we've better used the full scale of school choice in the last rendition of that. The value, the weighting is almost less of an issue than whether or not you use the full scale. So in the last rendition, a lot of the school choice had pretty close to the same values. And even if you had something that's heavier weighted, if you don't use the full scale, then you don't get any distribution in the final result. So while the weighting has changed, the more important thing is that you now see that those school choice values range from 5 down to 1.7. And so, in fact, by using that full scale, it's having a bigger impact for the purposes desired than if it were a greater weight, but you didn't use the full scale. So that's just a little bit how the math works out. But you're absolutely right we need to be paying attention to this issue. But using the full scale is mathematically the best way, more important than the actual weighting.
Right. Thank you for that, Dr. Martin, and I appreciate the question, and please understand that this is not a discounting of school choice. As Mr. Nieder noted, Wade Martin was a part of this entire discussion, and that is not to discount. When we go to the next slide, you will note that in that slide, which is slide 5, will show you indeed the data output for the top 6 schools on our top 25 list. And to Dr. Martin's point, you'll see various scores in that particular category. But moving from left to right on that particular slide, you will see that as of this year, the cumulative score shows that Briarcliff Elementary is top of the list, and then descending downward, Lockhart Elementary, Adams, Powell, Wendell, and Brentwood. You will notice in the first second column, you have our FCI score, which is our anchor, our building condition, showing the respective scores. Immediately to the right, you'll see health and safety. Again, the data supporting under that column. Immediately to the right of that column, school choice with the respective scores. Next column to the right being educational adequacy. And then finally, you see the cumulative scores. And then you'll see the graphic in the far right corner of the slide. Important to note, this is the top 6. There is a separate document that was downloaded in Assembly, which provides a list of all 25 for your reference and review. We'll stop here at this slide for a moment, and I think this is a good point in this portion to ask if there are any additional questions at this point or thoughts.
Questions? Mr. Sutton, is that a question in the making?
Yes, a little bit, but I don't have it quite formulated yet. So
Okay.
You go ahead.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I don't see any questions.
All right. We will proceed then to slide 6. We took this on the 26th of February to the area superintendents. We presented this to them for their comment and feedback. We had a good robust conversation with the area superintendents, a lot of good dialogue. They were appreciative of the update. We then took it to leadership last Friday, again provided the same presentation. Again, had a good conversation and back and forth on various parts of content that we shared. We're here today certainly providing you with an update on that, with our recommendation, and then finally swing space analysis and solutions are designed for renovations that presently already have design funding commitment in the 7-year rolling CIP.
Mr. Congdon, can you tell us anything about those conversations with the area superintendents? When they looked at this list of the top 25, did the rubric seem to match sort of the sense that the area superintendents had of the various buildings? I mean, it is always difficult to compare one school to the next, and for one area superintendent and the next area superintendent, right, each knows the schools in their district the best. And this tool is an attempt to try to merge all of that. But I'm just curious, how did this rubric sort of mesh with the on-the-ground experience from the professionals in the
Sure. I would say that feedback was good. They appreciated the continued refining that came out of this rubric. Again, I think a couple of qualifiers that are important to note is that we have a good partner in the county who provides us our annual funding. It's important to note that there is more need out there than funding exists. And yet, that being said, this is an important process that we do annually. I think it is important to note, too, that the next year design funding would be committed, would be fiscal year 24, meaning that discussion and likely commitment would come in late 22 or early 23. So this is important that we're doing this annually. It is important we're having this conversation, but I think it's important to note that a funding commitment is not happening this year. I think it's also important to note that we will be rerunning this rubric annually around this same time, end of the year, beginning of the following. And that when you look at this list, there are things that are certainly could change annually. A given building could receive a partial renovation, which would impact its facility index score, its facility condition index score. So it is not a perfect process, but I think that the feedback was positive. The acknowledgement was that we are making progress. We're getting closer, and we'll continue to work to address the needs that are most present.
Did you get any sense that, hey, this school completely missed it? Or was there a general sense that, if you look at, let's say, the top 20% of the top of the 20, these are the top 25, so the top 20% is going to be the top 5. And if we had money to do 5, that would be wonderful. But was there a general sense that, the top 5 to 7 hit it approximately right? I guess that's the fundamental of the question that I'm asking.
Right. Good question. So, when you look at the top 25 list, one of the things that will become obvious is that 2 of the top were Swift Creek and Malcolm, which makes sense because those 2 schools are currently committed to and underway. I think the short answer is for the most part, yes. However, I would present another qualifier in that schools like East Garner Middle, North Garner Middle, and Cary High School within the last 2 to 3 years have had partial renovation items that we would call fairly significant, like upgrades to their HVAC system, to their controls, lighting, things that are important, things that actually improve the school and bring it to today's standard. However, things that do impact the overall FCI.
So I guess that's part of the point that I wanted to bring out. So I'm glad you listed those 3 schools. And I think this tells us that just like we have the 7-year, rolling plan, it probably makes a lot of sense to look at sort of the at least 3 to 5 year evaluation of this rubric, because as you noted, those very renovations, I mean, we can go to each of those schools that you talked about and we know the major problems that need to be worked on. And, we don't want to lose sight of, just because we fixed this urgent piece, we don't want to lose sight of the long-range impact. So I just think it'll be important for us to look at the cumulative behavior of this rubric and not just sort of the year by year as we decide which buildings get onto the actual planning list and not. Ms. Kushner.
Thank you. And I appreciate seeing this list. I mean, also the top 6 or 7 have higher scores than the 2 Ockham and Swift Creek, which are undergoing renovation. So I think it also is something we need to pay attention to. And of the 25 that are on this list, 6 are in District 6, and there's at least 3 on that bubble that are right below the cutoff. So there is a lot of stacking, so are you suggesting it might also be fluid as we change the rubric annually?
There is, to answer your question, yes, there is some fluidity to the process because there is maintenance and operation that's going on in our district at various schools in any given year. And, that was, as I provided some examples of some of these schools, those are some examples that do, while they're very important, provide a better quality school, it does impact scores. So that's why the point was made that there will be, as this is rerun each year, there will be likely some movement in slots.
And I do think it's important for us to have a process that's clear, and so I guess we'll just have to go with that fluidity. But just to illustrate, seeing Briarcliff with that 5 score, that's a kind of an outlier for building conditions, so I'm glad it bubbled to the top. And similarly, Brentwood has a lot of outdoor, like Briarcliff, a lot of the building is older, and students transition in outdoor spaces, which I think is the case in Briarcliff as well. And particularly when we compare it to the real beautiful new schools that we're building, it adds to the urgency to upgrade the schools on this list. So I'll just throw all that out there. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kushner.
Well, and like anybody in education knows, rubrics are incredibly useful tools as long as they're used effectively. But if a rubric becomes this rigid straitjacket, then you can lose the life that you need in any kind of evaluation. And that's where I think this can be a very useful tool, but let's watch out for those East and West Garner and Cary Highs kinds of things.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to.
We've been waiting for this rubric, and Brian Roof really worked really hard to move this in. So I'm really excited that we have this. But you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other things that we have to look at the same time.
And there are reasons why Bockham and Swift Creek are currently, because swing space and the effect, the efficiency that's not captured in the rubric. So there's still
can be problematic because many schools that didn't. I mean, problematic with swing space. Some schools get bumped down because they can't go to a swing space. So we got to be careful. But you're right.
Well, and some of those had some renovation pieces as well that improved their FCI and moved them down. So, I mean, it may be that, and it's something to possibly think about, because of this issue with the FCI and how that is a driver, we might want to use a average FCI over the last 3 to 5 years, for example, because my guess is your maintenance and operation issues that are going to have this impact are probably going to be a 3 to 5-ish year cycle history, and so potentially, an averaged number over the last X number of years would help address some of this problem. But it's just something for us to think about. I think it's a very valuable tool. It's moving us in a good direction.
That's a good point.
Dr. Martin, this is Heather Scott, and I just had a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yes, please. I hadn't seen your hand. Thank you.
No, that's okay. So I thought I would just jump in here. So thank you. I appreciate all this information very much. So I just have a few quick question, or a few quick questions. Is it possible to see the feedback or the notes, specifically that went into these the formula, the outcomes, the numbers.
Certainly. I'm going to say the answer to that certainly is yes. And we'll look back and we'll see, what those notes might be and can provide as available.
Sure, I think it would just help me better understand some of the figures, especially given the changes that Ms. Cash pointed out. As we're seeing especially some of these schools that have some pretty substantial history within these communities. I was wondering how we're giving municipal leaders or town planners or just discussing with them, just to give them like a heads up, as you see this information coming out with these schools, is there any type of communication to share with them that these may not necessarily be up for innovation now, but that these are discussions that we're having internally within the school system? How is there an opportunity to have discussions like that?
Sure. Thank you. So I think the answer to that question, first, most important, our partnership with the county, we're in close discussions with them and meet. We have a standing monthly meeting and have those very discussions. We also have other frequent conversations with our partners in the municipalities. I would say that, it's not on every communication that we get down into that specific level of detail, but we are in frequent contact with them, keeping them aware of what's happening. As every project's a little bit different and has a various stage of approval given the circumstances, but there is open line of communication occurring.
I appreciate that. I think in particular, in certain parts of our county, having those relationships with the municipalities has a big impact. There are certain parts of our county where market share certainly impacts our schools, and I think that anything we can continue to do to build up that partnership, letting them know that we're there in good faith to work with them, is a win-win for everyone. So I do appreciate considering, just sort of keeping them in the loop. I appreciate that very much. And as I do see a few Eastern Wake schools, and Ms. Cash mentioned another school that was bumped because of a lack of swing space. Have we considered, depending on enrollment at some of our schools, like News River, for example, has a little bit of space in it. Has it ever been considered to use, parts of other buildings as swing space? Is that ever a possibility to look at so that projects that are needed in those parts of the county, if we have a building that might be a little under enrolled that has some space to host the school, is that something we could ever consider?
So I'm going to make the general statement and say that when the team is looking at this, all avenues and options are considered that are within reason and make the most sense for the program. And then, if anyone else would like to jump in and provide more specificity to that answer, that would be great. But I know that as a general rule, we're having open dialogue and considering all options.
Well, to your point, Ms. Scott, that's something we talked about in facility committee meetings many times over, is we maybe as a system need to think more effectively about swing space issues, because we need it all the time, and it often ends up becoming a barrier to what we're trying to do. So there's no magic solution, but it's almost like we need a central swing space that lots of schools could swing into and out of, but then you have to decide, do you build a swing space campus when you need all the other campuses? It's a revenue issue, but your point is very well taken, that we need to be creative and careful in thinking about swing spaces. Ms. Cash?
So I would like to highlight what Ms. Scott said, because it's going to be very important for you to be sure that the municipalities know what improvements are coming to their public schools in their town or city, because they look at that and they have the ability to often approve other educational areas that are coming to their area, and they have the ability to rezone or do the things that they need to do. So it should be a real priority of this committee to highlight to our municipalities what improvements we have planned for their public schools.
And thank you for saying that, Ms. Cash, because I know in particular, that the parts of the county that we both represent, these leaders are highly motivated. The towns are highly motivated to have a good partnership, willing to work with us and wanting to work with us. And I appreciate you saying that. And those were all the questions that I had, Dr. Martin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we will move forward to slide 7, which is our rolling 7-year CIP, and that will show you where we presently stand with fiscal year 21. It shows you the point made about Balcom and Swift Creek. We'll move on to slide number 8.
Well, can you just quickly
sorry, go
note, Douglas, when potentially will things move off of the prioritization score and onto the prioritization rubric? I think you mentioned it before, but it's probably not till next year at the earliest, and even then, we're talking probably only about 2 to 4 schools off this list at the most. Is that correct?
Right, so let's go back to that point for a moment. So if you look at the 7-year rolling CIP, the next year that we would be talking about making a design funding commitment would be for fiscal year 24. And presumably we would be having discussion and making a final decision on those commitments in either late fiscal year 22 or early fiscal year 23. And, I would say that, when you look at the most recent CIP, you'll notice at the bottom of that slide, there are 4 slots for renovations, 3 currently defined as elementary school and 1 at TBD, which could certainly be a middle or a high school. Those are the current slots. I will tell you that if there's a feeling that there's another middle or high that a higher priority or need than 3 elementary, I think that's part of the conversation and the decision when the time is appropriate for that funding commitment. And, I would also note that, within our CIP, we do have a funding slot for partial renovation. So as we look at this list, if there is a school of particular note, and we'll just use East Garner as an example, where there's a strong feeling that it has a particular need, there are dollars in that funding bucket to have a discussion about something that the stakeholders feel needs more immediate attention than what can be provided in a larger renovation scenario a couple of years down the road. Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question, Dr. Martin?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, I just wanted to reinforce that this list of 25 looks great, and there's a lot of people who could say, yay, I'm finally on the list.
That's right.
But the reality is there's only a small number even off of this list, and this list is an evolving thing. So basically, appreciate that. Just wanted to reinforce that this is a tool. This is not a wait list. Thank you.
That's correct.
One additional piece that chiefs have discussed in reviewing the list is needing to be able to clearly articulate as shifts happen from schools from year to year for the community, for the board, stakeholder groups around exactly how those shifts happened. And an example of that would be some of the schools that were mentioned earlier that are not on this list that a lot of folks have been talking about for years, and needing to be able to explain and articulate clearly to folks why they're not or why something gets moved, et cetera. So.
Right. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, continue.
Thank you for that, Superintendent Moore. All right, so we move on to slide number 8. As we're summarizing here for everyone, as we noted earlier this afternoon, the building condition and the health and safety are our key drivers. They're the heaviest weights of our categories, we'll call it, in the rubric. The recommendation is to proceed forward with that revised weighting. We continue to look and acknowledge that equity is an important component out there. And overall, big picture, we continue to refine and improve this process and evaluation of our schools in need. Moving forward, we talk about the CIP and its respective implementation, opportunities for continued improvement annually each year, as Superintendent Moore noted, and then lastly, SNAP and PRIMP being important categories. As we were refining and preparing for this presentation this afternoon, our teams have been working behind the scenes to look at the process development for SNAP. And with that, I would say any final comments or feedback on the rubric from anyone?
Thank you. Ms. Carter?
Just a thank you, because I really appreciate the last 2 meetings, specific information that's being shared, because I do think it's very helpful, not only to us, but to the community, and what Superintendent Moore spoke about, and addressing any changes and being able to clearly articulate that. So just a big thank you. I appreciate it.
Ms. Cash?
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Ms. Cash?
So quick question, when I look at the CIP team, is there only one area superintendent on that? Or am I missing somebody?
There is one area superintendent who I believe is the liaison, but Jonathan Enns, I believe that's who it is. And but I will tell you, going back to a question Dr. Martin asked earlier, the area superintendents are very familiar with the needs of the schools in their areas. And for years, the process required them to figure out how to collaborate across areas in a manner that was sort of counterintuitive, because they couldn't really speak to the needs of schools outside of their areas the same way. And so it became well, you get one and I get one and everyone gets, like you get a car, you get a car, you get a car kind of thing, right? And so it was just hard to do it. And they are very much on board and appreciative of this process, because Jonathan doesn't represent just Jonathan. The process requires him to go back to the entire team and seek feedback and then bring back recommendations from the entire team. So there's the sort of segmenting that was happening before is not there. Much more collaborative process.
Okay, good. I just want to be sure that there was knowledge across the district. I'm sure there was, but I just want to be sure. Because I don't know many of the people on the CIP team, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any further questions, so I think we're going to move on to the next agenda item.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Martin. I will pass the ball then to Jack McAleer. So if Sharon would please give him control of the screen.
Okay, I have control. Let me share my screen. All right. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yep.
All right, great. So thank you for the introduction. Thank you for letting me be here. My name is Jack McAleer with Cumming Corp. I serve as the Director of Program Controls for FD&C Group, and I'm here to talk about our cost model update for the CIP 2021 update process. Let's get into it. Before we get into the actual cost model update process, I wanted to give you all kind of an idea of, what is the cost model? Attached in assembly to this package is a file entitled 2021 Target Cost Model Estimating Guide, and that is kind of a very detailed 10-page white paper, if you will, that gives all the details of the different areas of the cost model and how that builds into the estimates that we do. But essentially, high level, what the cost model is our construction estimate template that we use for major projects. And so what it provides as an output is our construction cost estimates per program area or functional area of each project. For instance, the two biggest cost drivers of the cost model are the building's dollar per square foot and the site dollar per acre. Those two items drive about 75% of all the costs for each of our major projects. And so those are the two major components of the cost model. Some other areas that include, depending on what type of project it is, if it's a renovation project, a partial renovation project, there's factors for demolition, renovation, complexity of the different projects have different multipliers depending on levels. The cost model also includes design fees, contingency for the projects. Also, soft costs are added into each project, which includes areas like land surveying, geotechnical services, material testing, and permit fees would be included in the soft costs category. Also included in there is our furniture, fixtures, and equipment for each schools. We have line items for custodial and child nutrition equipment for each schools, as well as the media center equipment, books for the library, technology costs that VAS's group uses to upfit and outfit some of these schools. And then also operation and program equipment costs, which can be looked at as the principal funds and includes all kinds of different categories for school buses to, science speakers and stuff of that nature. So that's a real high level of what the cost model actually is. And we look at all those different areas each year and throughout the year as we're going through to evaluate various things, the trends that we're seeing with all the different items, what we're seeing when we look at budget versus bid summaries. And so what the update process is each year, what we're looking to do is to evaluate how accurate it is, how accurate our model is, which gives us our budgets versus our experience costs that we see from year to year and adjust as necessary. And so some of those key areas that we look at is the projects that went under bid within that year span versus what we budgeted for that project. And that'll give you, the actual construction costs we experienced during that year. We also look at changes or trends in the annual inflation and escalation rates that we see. Our coming cost group, we work with them pretty handily throughout the year to get a good pulse of what's going on in the with the sub trades and all the CMs. We see that from our level, from the owner's seat, really at bid day. But our coming cost group, they provide a little lower level and more detailed explanations because they have their pulse to the lower tier trades and what's going on really at street level, what those guys are seeing, how that can affect our bid day prices. Throughout the year, we're also looking at schedule and risk analysis of all of our projects and adjust based on, site-specific factors. If it has rivers or water of the U.S. going through the site, that's going to be an additional cost in addition to our base dollar per acre square footage that we apply. We also add adjustments for unique factors, for instance, COVID-19 impacts as an example put forth here, although the impacts for COVID-19 to our budgets was marginal at best, and so there really aren't any material impacts that affected, from a cost perspective, any of our projects. We also evaluate the design guidelines, the program space standards, and the legs documents for changes put forward through the CIP process that may have a cost impact related to any of those changes that we put forward from year to year. Local market conditions, that kind of ties into the escalation and annual inflation rates. and then commodity and other economic indicators. That would be material costs, raw material cost impacts that may or may not be going up or down depending on, macroeconomic factors that we're seeing. And with this year, we have seen some indications of there being some raw material cost impacts related to steel, gypsum, and some other things of that nature. But as I'll get into in a little bit, those are going to be offset with some other factors. So I'm going to hit pause right there and see if there are any questions at this point.
Any questions about the cost model? I will note I thank you for the materials you uploaded in Assembly, because that detailed 10-page document, I didn't read the full thing, but I did look through it. Very useful to help put it in context.
Okay, great. Great, yep.
I see no questions. Thank you.
All right, so moving on. So this year, in years past, give you all a little bit of history before we move on to this year. Typically what affects the cost model update and some of the biggest drivers to that dollar per square footage changes, or the actual square footage used for our programs, which then in turn drive the budgets, are the changes that come forward recommending through the program standards, the legs, and the design guidelines. So those three, program documents, any changes to those from year to year have fairly significant impacts to our cost model. In previous years, we've had a lot of changes to that, and so therefore a lot of changes to the cost model every year, and a lot of cost increase for projects based on those changes. For instance, last year we changed some of the square footages related to classroom space, increased that, I think, to 950 for a lot of the general classrooms. Some of the cafeteria spaces were increased to accommodate a 15 per square foot kid ratio or person ratio within those areas. Also, we looked at, changing the mechanical ductwork from a plenum return to a ducted return. So all of those things have cost impacts and drive up the project budgets. So historically, we've had a lot of them. This year in 2021, we have had no recommended changes to any of these documents. So no changes to any of these documents equals no cost impacts related to these changes. Are there any questions at this point on anything I've presented related to these?
I see none. Thank you.
Okay. No changes, no questions. Take it. All right, so that moves on to some of the other areas we look at. And if you remember, the two biggest drivers of the cost model is the dollar per square foot for building and the dollar per acre for the site cost. And how we evaluate those is looking at our bid costs for the year. So construction cost is where those are all captured. Both of those items are captured in the CM, in the GMP costs that we get at bid day. Based on this year, just a high level before I get into the details, and with COVID being the year that everybody knows it was, it's a bit of an asterisk of a year for a lot of reasons, right? That is no different in what we saw with our bids and those results. And so based on it being an outlier year, and even though we see some trends below, and I'll get into those details, we're not recommending any changes to the cost model this year. So what we did for the analysis of 2020, we had 5 projects that went under contract, went out to bid, and it was, I believe, 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 0 high schools. 3 of those were renovations, and 2 of them were completely new sites or new projects on a green site. And the order that these bids are listed in are from early in 2020 to late or in 2020, and then into February 2021. So if you look at York, it bid in March of 2020, which was right in line with budget. Coronavirus had not really hit, or was just starting to at that point, so it really didn't affect our bid day cost at all. Bid in line with budget, that's good. That's what we want to see. Herbert Akins Road Middle School was the next one to bid. That went in April. Also, still pretty early in the COVID impacts when people were just starting to work remotely. Everything was, the quarantines were just starting to get going, and lots of unknowns, but nobody knew what to do with it at that point. So that bid was in line with budget as well. It gets a little more interesting as the year progresses, and so the next one that bid was West Millbrook, which was in August, right about end of summer, and that one was $6 million under budget. And so now we're starting to see the impacts of COVID with a lot of the macroeconomic factors and where private sector and a lot of the municipalities of even the public sector projects, once COVID hit, in the spring, started evaluating that, the cost tax revenues, the revenues for private sectors, forecasts were not great. And so what you saw were projects started to drop off of the backlog. And so what happens then is we start seeing more competition at bid day, which means more competition, lower prices. So that's a good thing for us. Moving on throughout the year, as Fuller went to bid, which was right at the beginning of 2021, as well as Apex Friendship was shortly after that. Those two, we saw $3 million under budget for Fuller, and then about 1.6 to 2 million for Apex Friendship. And so that's unique to what we've seen in the past. The past several years has all been pretty flat, with very minor increases from what we see on bid day versus what we have budgeted. And so all these are due to COVID and the COVID-related impacts. Now, although we're seeing trends that are going, our budgets, what we have budgeted may be too high compared to what we're experiencing, that trend is not expected to last. And so that's why we're not recommending any changes to the cost model to bring down any costs based on what we saw in 2021, because it's just an outlier. The construction market is supposed to be back to full throttle anywhere from second to third quarter in 2021. And so those trends that we're seeing, we saw in 2020 and even recently, are going to start to taper off. And they may even come back bigger because the companies that had to take a cut or take a hit in their gross margins on bid day just to get a backlog of work going, so they cut their profits, they're going to be coming back and trying to make that up, right? They're going to want that money back at some point. So as competition in the construction market in all different sectors speeds up, we're going to start seeing less competition again, less participation at bid day, and our bids will be coming more back in line with our budget. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions. That was a lot.
I don't see any. I do want to acknowledge Ms. Johnson-Hostler, who's joined us remotely. No questions, but thank you for that review, and it makes sense from what we've seen in the community, but I think it's also wise not to make any adjustments based on this year's aberration, because we really can't use this year as to make any kind of trend forecast. So I think it's a wise recommendation. Thank you.
Great. Appreciate that feedback. And so if you look at the data that's in the table below, essentially what this is, and it's something we show every year, so we wanted to present it this year, even though there are no changes. But this first column is, if we were here last year, this is what our cost model looked like. This was the estimated cost for 2020, and then you escalate it to 2021 based on the rates we have in the model. And these are the costs you get per square footage for the middle school, elementary, middle, and high for the building. 2021 program changes, no changes, which means no additions or subtractions to the dollar per square foot basis, which essentially leads us to the 2021 cost model. And these two tables right here that I'm circling, actually, I don't know if y'all can see the circle. The two in blue are the same exact things that are in the two in orange for the previous year, because we didn't make any changes. So the delta column reflects that, no changes to the building. And the same goes for the site, the dollar per acre cost. All right, so the last slide here is related to kind of the inflation adjustments comparison. I touched on this a little bit previously that, risk and uncertainty were high for much of 2020, still is. We saw some flattening of the escalation in bid day prices with those decreases. The 3 projects we had bid towards the later half of the year. But even though the construction industry is expecting a slower start to 2021 with some of the same trends emerging or continuing from 2020, the consensus is don't change any budgets at this point because, again, there's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding COVID, a lot of uncertainty surrounding the election and what that'll do, at a macroeconomic level to the economy and how that trickles down to projects as well. And so the table below is our escalation table that we have applied into the cost model for every out year. So if you take a base year of 2020, if we have a project that is being constructed, say it's all being done in 1 year, the 2020 base year dollars are multiplied. It's a compounding interest, if you will. So if it's in 2021, it just goes by these first column rates to get the 2021 dollars. If it's in out years, these are compounded rates to give you the whatever year it falls under. And if you'll notice, from 2022 to 2027, the rates are essentially the same for each category: building, site, and FF&E. 2021, we have a bit higher rates, and even in 2020, the rates are slightly higher than what you're seeing here in 2021. When these were set back a few years back, that was based on the S-curve of how the economy was planned to go, because it was rolling for a while, and what you're seeing in 2022 is the anticipated drop-off and flattening of the growth that we've seen in the recent years. So again, with COVID, that puts a bit of an asterisk out there for what we will see this year, as well as the short-term next couple of years. And also the impact of the election results will play a major factor in whether or not these rates hold true or if we need to shift them in the out years. So I think we'll see a lot of that come to play out this year and can adjust as necessary as part of next year's update.
Okay, thank you.
That was it. Any additional questions, comments, feedback?
I don't see any. Thank you for the careful analysis. And I mean, if we could predict the economy, we'd be geniuses. But I think you've laid out a very clear picture and strategy, and that's the best we can do in terms of planning. And again, I think it's been such an improvement that we're sort of doing this on an annual basis instead of just every periodically 3 to 5 years, because that way we can be a little bit more responsive to what's actually going on. So thank you. Good input.
Okay, appreciate that. Okay, so part 2 of this is to share the executive summary of the CIP 7-year plan that we have so far put forth that's been updated for FY22 through FY28. Mm-hmm. And what I'm showing on my screen is going to be slightly different than what is in Assembly. I have added in some colors and some shading to talk a little bit about some of the adjustments we were required to make last year as part of the COVID impacts and the county request of us to reduce the CIP in several areas. So I wanted to touch on those before, just to keep everybody up to speed. And this is an Excel file. Can everybody see an Excel file?
Yes, reasonably. It's also in our
Okay.
backup documents. So, yeah. It's pretty
So
good.
the way this is organized, and it's organized by new schools up front at the top. It's organized by fiscal year, moving along the horizontal axis. And moving down from new schools, we move into the renovation categories, get those totals, and then we have the program requirements and program budget line items. I'm going to start with the program budget line items because these are the ones affected last year with the reduced impacts and requests coming down from the county related to COVID, and some cash flows and part of their debt model. So if you'll see the highlighted sections on my screen, it's not in what you have printed off. These are the items and years we had to reduce based on the county impacts. Now, what we did as part of that reduction and to mitigate the impact of that as much as possible is we did a savings analysis and brought forward as much funding as we could in order to supplement what the county was able to give us for those years, for those items, and not, so we could still meet those needs and not cut those categories fully. So if you look at tech devices, in FY22 and 23, those are both adjusted down $5 million for each year based on feedback from Marlo and her group. And that has impacts with some supplemental funding that Technology Group got from the CARES Act that they were thought that they could handle those reductions for those 2 years. The land category, which is where Betty Parker, this is her fund line to go out and purchase for all our land acquisitions. FY22 and 23 took a fairly significant hit, and 24 and 25 slightly less, but still we had to reduce those line items. Now, what we were able to do to make up for those 4 years is in FY21, we're taking $5 million from program contingency from a previous year to make up for that item. For FY22, we're taking $2 million for some savings we found and $3 million from another year's program contingency to give them additional $5 million. For that fiscal year, FY23, similar. We're taking $7 million from savings, bringing that forward, and then another $3 million from FY23 program contingency to solve that. FY24 and 25, we are bringing forth $5 million each year from some saved debt capacity. Land is a PAYGO line item, which means it's a cash-funded line item. But working with our county partners through the core team and their debt team, their debt managers, we were able to use debt to fund cash. They don't like to do that in all instances, but we all got very creative last year and able to make this work. Moving down to SNAP, that line item, although we reduced that based on current project forecast at the time, we are going to have to fund that with some savings that we have found this past year to make up for some additional projects that came online for SNAP. And then program contingency and program management were both reduced. Some of the contingency is being used to fund the items I just spoke about above for some of those years. And program management, it is, we just reduced slightly for that year. So those are all the changes that came out of the request from the county and the multiple iterations we went through last year in terms of the CIP. And I'd note that all of those changes in reduction requests, we were able to, not affect any of our major projects with the savings and other creative ways we were able to fund those line items. So that takes us into this year's summary. Again, there's so much unknown and uncertainty with COVID still hanging out there, and with the tax revenue forecast coming in from the county. They have requested that we keep our CIP plan flat, meaning no changes to the bottom line number, no increases, which is typically the changes that we see. We typically don't decrease it, overall bottom line. So what does that mean for this year? What does that mean that we can do with this year's CIP update? It's a bit constricting. And so what we have done here, if you'll see, and on your handouts, FY22 through FY27, 0 changes from last year's approved update to this year's draft update in front of you. There are no changes to any project budgets based on the cost model update that had no changes, and there's no changes to shifting any projects around at this point, or increasing any of the programmatic line items at the bottom. County does not have the capacity to support that, and so we can't do it. And so what changes are for this year is in FY28. And so focus in on what actually did change from last year to this year is you'll see the construction funding. So no projects were added. These are all the tail end construction draws or the construction funding portions of the CIP plan that are hitting in the FY28 for projects that were already on the plan. There are 2 new ones planned in the out years, and their construction funding is hitting in FY28. There's also 1 renovation project hitting in FY28, and that was also planned last year. And keep in mind that these are all TBDs and placeholders, these ones in the out years. And so as that was spoken to and alluded to in Douglas's presentation with the prioritization, names will be put to these at the appropriate time. And even depending on how the enrollment studies trend this year and in other years, as enrollment growth, if that tapers off, then we can look at shifting some of these placeholders for new schools down to the renovation category. And there's opportunity to do so with the annual update. So other than those 3, with construction funding in FY28, the program line items at the bottom all rolled forward with a blanket 3% escalation factor applied as compared to FY27. And that gets us to our FY28 total and essentially our updated rolling 7-year plan total. Any questions at this point on what I've gone over so far?
Just a quick minor question. Lines 42 and 43 in fiscal year 28, it looked, the dollar values seem to have inverted. We had been doing around 28-ish million for devices and 7.5-ish million for infrastructure. Those are, at least in our printout, but what was uploaded to Assembly got reversed, so it's only 7.8 for devices and 29 for infrastructure. Is that a typo, or are we changing from needing devices to needing infrastructure?
Nope. Yep, that is a typo. It's a user error on my part. The other file we used that has the full numbers in it, those 2 categories are transposed as it is shown on this. So when I transferred it over, I just made that mistake. So
not a problem. Done that kind of stuff more than once. Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Actually, could you upload a PDF of what you showed here to Assembly? Because we're going back to records. Your notes that you have in the column to the right, I find would be a useful reference.
Okay, great. Yep, we can do that.
Ms. Cash.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think maybe in the February meeting, we might have gone through this, but looking at the life cycle building, furniture, equipment, I guess these are things to bring our schools, existing schools, up to what our new schools have. Is that what that is here? Or?
I mean, it's that. It's also replacement, right? Chairs wear out.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, a lot of our schools don't have blackboards yet. They don't even have. I mean, where do we address that in here? Like tomorrow? I'm just. Is that all? I mean, because the costs seem low here, and I'm thinking because they're doing so much on their video, the video projections and things, and if they don't have even a whiteboard or something in their room. We have a lot of schools like that, I think.
So they currently have blackboards and need to be upgraded to a whiteboard or video board. Is that what you're?
Yeah, all of the above.
Well, I think our note was that even some schools don't even have a whiteboard.
No,
Some classrooms don't.
A lot of our schools don't even have whiteboards. I don't know if a lot. Some don't. I mean, we need to be fixing that, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think what category that would fall under. I don't think that would be necessary life cycle furniture. And the life cycle building category is more related to, deferred maintenance and the systems of the building, for instance, HVAC.
Oh, that makes sense.
Systems.
That
Some of
makes
that would come in
sense.
the annual budget, not just in the capital. The capital plan is distinct from the annual budget. But I mean, I think your point is that, these dollar values look like a big dollar value, right? 2.5 billion over the 7 years. That's a big dollar value. And yet, like you note, there are some fundamental things that just aren't in classrooms. When you look at this list, compared to the list of 25 schools that we just talked about, there's not a slot for 25 schools in the next 7 years. So, I think what you're highlighting is there's still a huge deficit between needs
I thought we actually talked about that. I thought we talked about like how we were going to bring schools like maybe athletic fields up, or I don't know why I go there, but there was some discussion during our last meetings prior to now about how we would
That's partly
bring.
where the PRIMP funding comes from to deal with some of those smaller things that never made it to a CIP level. So slowly we're creating structures between SNAP and PRIMP that are allowing us to address some of those things. But it's going to be an ongoing need until we can find the cash.
So I do think that part of what becomes helpful here would be to have a follow-up session that better defines or creates the space for what goes into PRIMP or SNAP, so that there's an understanding versus what we do in the CIP, and then seeing where there are gaps or things that are left out, and we're trying to figure out where they go.
Okay, I'd like to do that soon. Thank you.
And we can talk about that for either facilities or work session. I could see it potentially coming either place, but I'll make a note of it. Okay, thank you for that input. I don't see any hands up remotely.
Dr. Martin, just a quick clarification on that last question. So when we talk about equipment, and we'll put whiteboards in that category, the dollars for those particular items are funded in the line item in the annual budget under academic equipment. So just wanted to share that to bring clarity to the question.
Thank you. But, it's to everybody's point, the recent point, I think it would be worthwhile to sort of, at some point, do just another one of those tutorials. What's SNAP, what's PRIMP, what's CIP, and what's in the annual budget. Thank you. All right. I believe we're ready to move on then to Fuquay-Varina Middle School.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Moore, Chair Martin, and members of the Facilities Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present the schematic design for the M15 Fuquay-Varina Middle School Replacement Project. We and our design team, which includes Clark Nixon Architects and CLH Design, are looking forward to sharing this presentation with you today. There's always the why when designing a new school. What are the ultimate project goals and desired final outcomes for this venture, and what are the factors which influence decisions being made along the way? Well, this is the why we are approaching the design of the school as we are. As a replacement school with an existing population, it was vital that we understand what makes this school community what it is and what it has been, and to that, what would be important to carry over to the new building and what should probably just be left behind. Through a series of surveys and meetings with the Fuquay-Varina Middle School principal, staff, and students, along with neighbors and other community members, we learned about the existing culture of the school. It is a tight-knit microcosm within a community who values its history, diversity, and identity. The school leadership is very strong, and there's a clear bond of respect and sense of belonging between the teachers and the students. So the synthesis of this information led us to establish a set of guiding principles, which we are using to inform the decisions we're making for both the tangible and intangible aspects of the school design. They are to honor the history of the school community while embracing the future, to provide a campus identity which is unique to this school and reflects what's important to it, to take advantage of the school's proximity to adjacent neighborhoods by encouraging walking and biking to and from school. This is a big one, to provide a connection between building and site, both visually and physically, in order to take advantage of natural features and opportunities for outdoor learning environments, to provide a welcoming and defined main entry with clear circulation and wayfinding, and to provide support for the grade level team organization through the use of learning communities. Through the development of our guiding principles, these project goals basically distill the breadth of information learned from the students and staff about what is most important. So maintaining the existing culture, providing flexibility and choice with engaging instructional and learning spaces, which as a district we are trying to do in every school, new or existing, and to provide a strong connection with the site. The new school is approximately 2 miles south of the existing school along South Main Street. I hope you all can see my cursor. This is South Main Street in Fuquay-Varina. This is Judd Parkway, and our site is here. Bowling Road comes off of South Main, right here to the south, and it connects with what is now known as Kenneth Branch Drive. It will soon become, that street will soon become renamed, as it will serve as the driveway for both the middle school and a proposed elementary school. Just as a refresher from the master plan presentation of several months ago, our site contains Kenneth Creek along the eastern side of the site, along with a portion of the Greenway on the east, 2 prominent streams, and a 5-acre wetland area. The site has quite a bit of downward slope from highest along South Main Street to lowest at Kenneth Creek. And to the north, south, and east of this property are new single-family neighborhoods continuing to build. The buildable areas of the site are shown here in these orange dashed lines. One there, and this also. As this is a shared site with M15 and a future E49, these 2 diagrams illustrate specifically where the middle school and elementary school sites would be best suited. The diagram on the left shows the middle school in black and white to the east of the large wetland area, and the future elementary school in color to the west. This drawing illustrates the area needed for a large 2-story elementary school. However, the outdoor play program standards would be significantly compromised in order to accommodate a large elementary school. You can see at the bottom of the screen, for a 716 student capacity, we're at a 32,000 square foot deficit for what the legs require for the grassy outdoor play. Conversely, a smaller elementary school of 650 capacity or so does meet the outdoor play requirements, program standards, also a 2-story school in the same location, both up here along South Main Street. Zooming in on the middle school site, we see access from the Phillips Point neighborhood to the north, coming into the site via Award Street, This is the drive that would be used by buses and staff. You can also see bus parking and staff parking here along the north edge of the site. On the south side of the site, what will formerly be Kenneth Branch Drive, is our school driveway. It's the carpool drive and drop off at the main entrance to the school here. On the southeast side of the main building, there is a large green space which is designated to accommodate outdoor instruction and learning. There is also the north-south access through the site between the main field and the wetlands, which would be gated during school hours and open for after-school and evening events. I mentioned the slope of the site earlier. It does slope about 95 feet from west to east, and that has actually afforded us the opportunity to have the ground floor of our classroom wing, shown here, partially below grade, making the overall profile of the school seem more like 2 stories rather than 3. That's a more integrated profile with the surrounding neighborhood, so it's not going to be, overshadowing the surrounding neighborhood. This wing is essentially the same for the 3 floors and is organized by grade level. This configuration illustrates the middle school curriculum teaching mentioned earlier. The teams are communities that link not only to themselves but to each other. So here we have one team of 4 classrooms with a collaborative space, and here is another team of 4 classrooms, etc. So on each floor, there are 4 teams that all have individual and shared collaborative spaces between them. For each team, language arts, social studies, math, and science are grouped with a collaborative space. So there's opportunities for pairing students or small group study that can be accommodated within these areas to provide a real variety of teaching and learning environments. And there are provisions for 2 or more teams to work together. So you really have this sense of community in your own team and an understanding of a sense of community with the other teams on your grade level. Special education is incorporated into all floors of the classroom wing in order to provide a cohesive grade level experience for all students. We're very excited about this classroom wing as the adjacencies of spaces and relationships among and between the teams will promote unity and community at each grade level. So we think this is really quite a strong model for middle school design because of the specific curriculum of keeping teams together. This is the main level of the school, through which the front entry and the bus entry and the back enter. Here you see the clear delineation of hallways, which provides simple navigation to all parts of the school. This was one of the issues addressed by the existing school community as being very important. So admin and student support services here in green have a good supervisory position in seeing everybody coming into the school, either from bus or carpool. This is the secretary, receptionist can see everything coming. Visual arts as well, and performing arts, as well as a CTE suite may comprise the rest of the first floor here. And everything is easily accessed to the athletics and dining area. The second floor contains the media center, shown in blue right here, CTE suite, other special ed classrooms, and then the upper floor of the classroom wing. This is the courtyard at the existing Fuquay-Varina Middle School. You can see it's bound on all sides by buildings, and several of the large shade trees that used to be planted there have died or been removed. Still, the courtyard is a place where large groups and maybe even an entire grade can be in the same space at once. This was a feature that the school community really wanted to carry over to the new site. It was very important to them. With the lovely exposure to the south and east between the admin and classroom wings of the building, we have an exciting opportunity for a common green where we can offer a number of flexible outdoor spaces to accommodate multiple size groups in a setting that connects with the natural elements of the site. So taking advantage of the sloping grade, terraced areas indicated here as examples can become outdoor rooms for use as learning and teaching spaces, for performances, for gathering. There's also stormwater management on the site, and that system also creates ideal opportunities for outdoor learning, where students can observe native species of plants and animals and their connections to the wider ecosystem. Along with the large wetland area and Kenneth Creek, there are multiple venues for scientific exploration and discovery on this site. We talked earlier about collaborative spaces, which we have dotted through. You can see them shown in pink here in this typical classroom wing plan. We're also going to incorporate a learning stair. This central stair here is not just a circulation stair, but will also incorporate a learning stair with it. This stair will have constant visual access at all levels and physical access to the outdoors on both the main and lower floors to the common green. So there are a lot of big windows over here, and the idea is that at this learning stair, you have a constant view of the outdoor learning areas in the common green. So there's that visual access, and then on the lower two floors, there's physical access where you can get out to the green. The image to the right shows a more expansive configuration of the learning stair, perhaps at the lowest floor where we have some more room under the stairs. But that's just to give you an idea of generally how we're looking at this feature of the school. I think the kids love learning stairs, and having this view out to the common green is just going to be really, really fantastic and not what a lot of schools have. So I think they'll really enjoy that visual connection with the outdoors. Learning commons at the middle school level can take many forms. Our intent is to provide spaces which support the classroom while providing flexibility of seating options and group sizes. The current Fuquay-Varina Middle School has an area dubbed the Fishbowl, which has become a coveted space within the school for its contrast with the structure of the classroom. The students absolutely love it and consider it a privilege to be able to spend time there. So our new building will have several of these collaborative spaces throughout the classroom wing and CTE area, affording a greater number of students the opportunity to work together in a diversity of settings. So these are just images of what the learning commons in various places may look like, again showing different seating arrangements and group areas and sizes. The idea is to have as much variety for different size groups and different activities as possible. As I stated before, having a clear and inviting main entry was a very big concern for the current school. The school has been added onto over the decades, and sometimes it's hard to figure out where you go in to get to admin. So in this design, we wanted to emphasize it. The carpool drop-off and pickup is directly in front of the main entrance, and architecturally, the entrance exhibits a physical hierarchy in comparison to the volumes around it. Of course, the school name will be over the entry, so it should be very easy to find and very clear. Finally, the new classroom wing is the true heart of the school, and it enjoys views to the common green across its entire length, again fortifying the integration and symbiotic relationship between indoor and outdoor learning and teaching spaces. We and our design team are really excited about the opportunities being created for the students and staff of Fuquay-Varina Middle School. And we thank you for your time in viewing our schematic design presentation this afternoon.
Thank you. A lot of really interesting and neat features that you're designing into this. And I think it's what's so exciting, as many know, architecture is a minor hobby of mine. But good design doesn't necessarily cost more, because everything you're talking about is within our regular budgeting. It's just, how do we creatively think about spaces, and how do those spaces then impact the learning process? And I think I've seen just a number of features that you talked about today, which really do capture that, not adding cost, but very much adding value. So really appreciate that perspective in the conversation. Ms. Cash.
Yeah, it's a very pretty building. Thank you for that. Quick question. I should know this, maybe Fuquay-Varina Middle School, do they have trailers right now on their campus?
I think they might have a couple, and I appreciate that question because I knew I figured it was going to come up today.
Well, don't worry about that yet. Don't worry about that. So my question is, so how many students does this middle school hold after completion of the project?
It's being designed for 1,248 students.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Was there something you wanted to add about trailers? Since you brought up the question that you thought it might be asked, there might be some information that would be helpful for us to know.
Actually, there is some information. We have looked at this site. It's actually a fairly compact site given the wetlands, which, as we all know, are untouchable, and stream buffers, et cetera, and topography. And we have realized that there's actually really no room to put mobiles, given the site constraints. So we would be limiting the school population to 1,248.
So that's helpful. I mean, it's not near that high now, so I just want to be sure we weren't losing any capacity. No, we're not.
No.
Ms. Cash, this is Mr. Martin. I've just checked the current FER, and Fuquay-Varina Middle School does not currently have any modulars on its site.
Okay, thank you, Wade.
Yeah, as well as being a condensed site, the topography would make it incredibly challenging.
And what's the current
as well?
What's the current enrollment, Mr. Martin?
I think it's 1,076. I may be lying.
You just know that off the top of your head.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at his document.
The current enrollment is 1,097 students.
And there was an intentional discussion in the repurposing of the current Apex Middle School site to something else and moving them to this site about the necessary gain in seats that would need to occur, as well as, trying to maintain some of the cultural, historical aspects, traditions, and so forth, that sort of thing. But the primary reason was we needed a larger site, needed more seats, and that could not be accomplished even with the full renovation of Fuquay-Varina Middle because it's on a very compact site.
And if I may add to that, Superintendent Moore, they don't have a regulation size field or a full size field at all. So their exterior amenities are compromised on that site as well.
Mm-hmm.
The existing site.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
All right. Any further questions? I really like what you've been doing with the wetlands, using the topography, using the challenges of the site to be an educational space is great.
Thank you. We have a wonderful team working on this with us.
All right, I see there's no more hands raised here in the room, and I don't see any hands. No, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, I see your hand now. Ms. Johnson-Hostler, we don't see or hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, there we go.
Okay. I could not dial in on my audio on my computer for some reason today, so I had to use my phone. And clearly, I've never tried to unmute a phone on this platform. So my apologies for taking a while with the technology. Again, I echo the sentiments you've heard with the appreciation of what you've done with the site. The only question I would ask, and again, people have asked about capacity. Of course, part of this new change was the capacity is really, really small. So Dr. Martinez and Wade Martin, how much conversation has happened about the fact that this really still isn't going, based on the topography and all the other issues, that it's not really going to give the middle school much more capacity than it has? So has there been a community dialogue about this and any feedback in terms of readiness to prepare the community that the initial thought was that we'd be able to add more capacity?
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. I have not been a part of that ongoing dialogue with that design team at this point. And I'm hearing this information today along with you, but certainly that was one of the main points for making this move in sight. So I think we will certainly continue to have that dialogue as we move forward. But I've not been a part of that dialogue at this point.
Okay, thank you. And we can certainly circle back to it, but I know that there's been one meeting that was open to the school community, so I wasn't sure if it came up, but we can circle back to it. And again, thank you for what you've done given the topography of that space, but I certainly can imagine that this is, we'll be back here talking about capacity issues still in Fuquay for middle school, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, and as Superintendent Moore mentioned, right, we talked about this when we purchased the site. We talked about this when we were evaluating, do we renovate on the current site or go somewhere else? There just is not a lot of land in the area, but you're absolutely right. Capacity is going to continue to be an issue in this area because there's a lot of construction in an already dense area. So ongoing. All right, well, thank you very much. I see no further questions. Are we ready to go ahead and shift to Hilltop-Needmore Elementary?
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, it's Shane Webster. Can everyone see the screen?
We see your name. We don't see the presentation yet.
Okay, let me try that again.
Now we see your desktop. There we go.
Okay, terrific. All right, good afternoon. I'd like to thank the committee for this opportunity to present the master plan and schematic design for the Hilltop-Needmore Road Elementary School. Before I dive into the presentation, I'd like to acknowledge the design team whose talents and efforts contributed to this presentation, excuse me. Little Diversified Architectural Consultant is the lead designer. Stewart Engineering, our civil and landscape designer, and T.A. Loving and J.E. Dunn is our construction manager. They've all worked collaboratively together, and have done a great job. We always begin each project with a vision statement that frames the who, what, when, where, and of course the why for each project. Ultimately, the vision statement is our roadmap to designing a 21st century learning environment that encourages collaboration, exceptional communication, creativity, critical thinking, enhanced connectivity between indoor and outdoor learning, as well as good stewardship of our natural environment. Establishment of several core values helps to define critical project goals and outcomes. Project values such as immersive learning, maintaining neighborhood connectivity, being responsive to the site, and delivering a high-performance facility reinforces the idea that learning can happen anywhere. Our site is located on Hilltop-Needmore Road, approximately 3/4 miles west of US 401. The area designated as the site is made up of 2 separate parcels owned by the board and the town of Fuquay-Varina. There is an ILA agreement to jointly prepare a master plan for the 2 sites south of Hilltop-Needmore Road. And the master plan was presented in more detail back in the fall, but some of the key features that were shared with you at that time was the fact that the master plan included a community center and senior center, which would be developed by the town of Fuquay, a large elementary school, and shared parking for both. What you see on the screen is on the left is the master plan, with the community center and the senior center located at the north end of the site and the elementary school further south. Shared parking is located between the 2 facilities for easy access to minimize the environmental impact. Red circle number 4 indicates the approximate location of the proposed community center parking lot near the 2 staff and visitor parking areas for the school designated by the red circles 2 and 3. Gated connections between the parking lots will allow sharing of these parking amenities after school hours. Buses will enter and exit the site near the northwest corner of the site near Hilltop-Needmore Road. There are 2 gated access points for emergency and after-hours access on the west side of the site from Brushy Meadow Road. The main entrance is located near the northeast corner of the site, directly across from Shady Green Road. The main drive is designed to accommodate up to 3,000 linear feet of parent stacking without obstructing access to the town's community center parking lot during peak pickup and drop-off time. And to the greatest extent possible, the classroom wings are located to the west side of the building, away from the main drive and greenway trails for enhanced security. All classroom wings are oriented north-south for optimal orientation. The protected play areas are located along the south and west sides of the school. Each of the protected courtyards are intentionally designed to be uniquely different and will include opportunities for outdoor learning. Because the planners believe that 2-story building is the most appropriate scale for younger children, understand the impact that a building height has on outdoor spaces, we are able to determine what the appropriate distance between each classroom wing should be in order to balance the amount of sunshine and shade delivered to each courtyard. One of the kind of neat little features about this little site, this little outdoor amphitheater that we're building into the mounds that were left with us by the former golf course. And you'll have to cross a small imaginary bridge, however, to get there. And so just part of the fun of being on the site. Site security is a very important element of this master plan because of the shared nature of the site itself. Having a public entity and somewhat, 2 public entities, but one being more public and one being more private in the sense of how it's being used, makes security very important. It is important to ensure that the tunnel, which runs under Hilltop-Needmore Road, located near the main entrance, here's the tunnel, and a greenway that flows with the tunnel. Make sure that greenway exits off of the site as quickly as possible, but the tunnel itself needs to discharge onto the community center site rather than on the school system site, which is one of the main reasons why the school was pushed to the south. The administrative offices or suite is the green block in the school, which is located in the northeast corner of the building. This location provides nearly 260 degrees of visual security across the site. Another key feature of the building design is the educational wings. Each of the educational wings is basically a group of classrooms and core spaces arranged in islands, learning islands, if you will, connected by bridges that are transparent. So when you arrive at the site and you arrive at the building, you can actually see through those bridge connections between the islands and see into the courtyards on the other side of the building. In this elevation, you get a sense of what you will see when you arrive. So you see the educational islands here with the bridge connectors in between, which are transparent. Looking through those, you'll be able to see the courtyards beyond. This partial elevation is where bus loading and unloading will take place. This facade faces the community center. The design of this facade will continue to evolve as the design of the community center evolves to create a cohesive relationship between both buildings. A large window opening can be seen near the right edge of the image. Those high windows provide plenty of soft natural light into the indoor play area. The site is a former golf course, and it provides a lot of diverse site features similar to the topography of North Carolina. Features such as high earth mounds that spring 8 to 10 feet from the ground that separate the school from the neighborhood along our western border, the relatively flat terrain and wetlands on the eastern edge of our site, are representative of our coastal plains, and the gentle sloping terrain between our Piedmont. The site is a metaphor of the topography of North Carolina. The design team recognized these similarities and attempted to weave this metaphor into the overall building and site design whenever possible. We intentionally committed a lot of time to discussing and identifying educational opportunities outside the building. The precedent images that you see here will inspire the diversity of outdoor spaces we hope to provide. From the rigid edges of the image on the left, which reflect the tectonic characteristics of our mountains, one of the courtyards has been dubbed the tectonic courtyard and includes similar angular design features as you see here. The soft curving elements of the image on the right, which is symbolic of the Piedmont, and will play a role in the design of the Piedmont courtyard. The other precedent images will serve as inspiration as we continue to explore other outdoor educational opportunities. This is an early partial view of the courtyard the design team has dubbed the Piedmont courtyard. This space, along with the other courtyards, will be a primary focus of our design effort in the next phase of design. In this courtyard, we plan to develop outdoor classroom spaces surrounded by gentle, sloping mounds and shading devices. This is the overall floor plan of the first floor. As I mentioned earlier, the building is organized as 3 islands of alluring, linked by 2 transparent bridge connections. The northernmost island includes administration and main entry points into the building designated by the red dots. It also includes the indoor play area for PE, dining, and music. There will also be an outdoor dining patio outside of the dining area. The center island contains pre-K and kindergarten wing of the building, with the media center to the right with its outdoor reading patio. The southernmost island on this floor houses the first grade in the west wing and the 4th grades in the east wing with the art room and outdoor patio overlooking the green to the south. There are 2 security doors located at the mid-island, at the north end and at the south end, that basically compartmentalize the building into 3 separate zones in case of a lockdown or emergency scenario. The second floor is comprised of the colored areas indicated on the plan that you see, and is organized much the same way as the first floor. The second grade education island is located in the center of the building with this overlook into the media center. Grades 3 and 5 are located in the southernmost educational island. Both islands are linked by a transparent connector with a stair and elevator that leads down to the first floor. The image on the left is an example of a typical educational neighborhood that includes a diverse collection of learning common spaces and classrooms. Each educational, I got ahead of myself here. Okay, this school represents the next generation of elementary school design. We work closely with our academic partners by integrating them into the design process. In doing so, we have redefined the relationship between traditional educational learning spaces and how we deploy and use our learning commons. Each educational island is a variation of this abstract neighborhood concept that you see on the upper left, where we provide diversity of learning spaces that are easily supervised while supporting a variety of activities to take place simultaneously. These spaces are intended to be places to create, discover, exchange, impart ideas, and to encourage critical thinking skills. We're going to discuss the impart image further into the presentation. So taking the abstract, we come to a proposed floor plan, which is going to be typical for most of the educational islands or wings of the building. We have introduced, the image on the left, we have introduced small meeting rooms. Each meeting room is shared by 2 classrooms that can be used for special activities with small groups of 3 to 5 students. These spaces are extensions of the classroom and can be used as a quiet place for students who are easily distracted or a variety of other activities. Classrooms are paired with sliding pocket doors between them to allow one teacher to temporarily supervise 2 classrooms if needed. The doors also provide a second means of egress to avoid entrapment during lockdown scenarios. Each of these educational islands have a variety of open and closed learning common spaces that are easily supervised. A new kind of learning common space called the impart room is being planned for grades 1 through 5. The impart room can be used for various kinds of educational activities outside the normal classroom. These spaces will be fitted with risers for sitting, some of which may be retractable for maximum flexibility. If necessary, these spaces can become small breakout classrooms in the future pandemic. As you can see from the image on the right, the building is designed to provide strong visual connections to the outdoors, so you have great views from just about anywhere inside the building. The innovations proposed for this school are intended to provide maximum flexibility for teachers to adapt their teaching environments to the needs of the student while providing enhanced level of security. One of the most exciting new features of this school is a response to what planners like myself feel is the most underutilized space in most elementary schools, the stage. In the past, schools were designed with the stage next to the play area, making it unusable while the space is being used for physical education or PE. Most of the time, the stage is nothing more than a dark space hidden behind a curtain. We made it a priority to redefine how the stage is designed and used. With input from academic stakeholders, we plan to transform this space into one that can be used for a variety of activities at any given time. The new stage design is still being developed, but as you can see, our goal is to make it multifunctional. It will continue to serve as a stage for large performances and presentations to an audience gathered in the dining area. The traditional large stage opening, or proscenium, will have a movable wall panel system that will transform the stage into a classroom, a large meeting room, dance floor, or group activity space, even while dining is in use. A retractable wall system is also planned for the south wall of the stage to allow the stage to be open to the main corridor for small, more intimate group activities. These changes will transform what was once an underutilized dark space into a town square within the educational village. The design as presented meets our current space standards in new and innovative ways. Learning common spaces have been reinvented. There are multiple sizes and types of educational learning spaces to respond to different educational needs. Overall, building security has been enhanced. The site and building design maintain a strong connection to the site and to the community. And I would like to mention that this design was presented at a community meeting back in December. The design concept was well received by all who attended. I would like to close by thanking the committee for allowing us to present what the planning group considers the next generation in elementary school design to meet the needs of the 21st century learner. I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, a lot of really good design features incorporated, making sure that design and education go hand in hand. Really appreciate that focus. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Cash.
I just really like that stage. I think that's going to be a great concept. So I hope that I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Looking at transforming spaces that were, previously unused. Here we're seeing the stage and some of the others we saw, turning the stairs into a learning stair. There's a lot of spaces in buildings that traditionally have been unused that, we're turning into these collaborative spaces. Locker bays become community or collaborative spaces. That's the kind of thinking that we really need to make sure our schools are great learning spaces. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. I also really appreciate seeing this very unique building. And I just had a few questions. Could you let me know what remind please the overall building capacity?
Sure. The capacity for this school, it's a large elementary school, so it's 716.
Thank you for that.
Designed for 800, capacity 716.
Thank you. And I was curious about the separate play space and the dining, and that in many of our elementary schools there is, there's a partition so that you can expand and make that space larger. So I was curious about the reason to go with this design, and then also the capacity for each of those rooms.
Okay. I guess what kind of triggered the thought about the stage being underutilized was the fact that COVID has opened up our thinking on a lot of different fronts. And so we're looking for new ways and new places to have classrooms in these kinds of situations. And so, it was an obvious need there that we need to figure out how to better utilize the stage. After a lot of discussion, we've come to the conclusion that, those big movable partitions, one, they're very expensive. Two, they're kind of difficult to open and close. So they're rarely used in terms of opening and closing and opening it up into a big, large space. So I think for most functions, a space like the dining is adequate for the size gatherings that you would need to have in a lot of elementary schools. Will there ever be a need for a larger space? Possibly. But, I think we're going to try and incorporate something outdoors if we can to accommodate larger groups. But, I think the dining area is pretty big. And so you can bring a lot of people into that space.
Do you have an estimate for how many folks can fit in the dining hall, the capacity for that space?
I don't off the top of my head. I have to do some calculations, get back to you. We haven't really got down to the nuts and bolts in terms of numbers of seats we could actually fit in there.
I appreciate that. And what an optimistic question it is as well right now to to have. And then just two other quick questions. I love the idea about the classrooms, the idea to be able to open those up for supervision and collaboration purposes as well. How soundproof are those? Because I do appreciate that you mentioned the areas for students that might have a little bit of over stimulation with sensory input. So just curious how much noise classrooms might be hearing from their neighbors.
Right. Well, we're going to be sensitive to that. I mean, the design team has already brought that up as an issue, and that's why we're going with a pocket door that can be acoustically treated much easier and better than some people call a barn door, that slides on the surface. We're sensitive to the fact that could be an acoustical issue, so we're going to try and mitigate that as best we can. I really don't think it's going to be a problem.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then my last question, I wanted to make sure I understood correctly. The carpool or the bus loop will be going in and out directly on Hilltop-Needmore Road. Is that correct?
That is correct. According to the traffic analysis that we've had done, most likely we'll have to go in and out, right hand in, right hand out, and eventually Hilltop-Needmore Road will become a divided road in the future, and so that just makes it that much more important. However, we have the ability to actually drive through straight ahead and exit out Shady Green Road, the Shady Green entrance, the main entrance into the site, and turn left at that point if that becomes an issue.
And do you know if are there any plans for having any stoplights at those intersections?
Yeah, not at this time. It's been discussed, but NCDOT and MSDA, they have not seen the need to provide one anytime in the near future.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Those were all my questions. Thank you. Thanks for the answers. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
All right, that leads us to the last agenda item, and that's the facilities 3-month forecast. Again, we don't need to go into lots of detail there, but we try to provide that so people have a heads up of what all's coming up. Mr. Cogden, anything you want to highlight in particular coming up?
In particular, thank you, Dr. Martin. I would just suggest Board of Commissioners coming up next week, certainly the Board of Education meeting next week. Then we go into April. There's a date to still be determined where we have our annual joint meeting, which is between our Board of Education and Board of Commissioners. So that'll be coming in the month of April. And then as we press forward into May, we'll be presenting the 2021 CIP as was historically done last year as well for approval.
Very good. And I'll just note, as we discussed last time, we want to do some sort of strategic long-range planning for facilities. What are things that we want to incorporate? A lot of these design elements that we're seeing today came out of some of the discussions that we've had before. So, we want to stay, thinking on that creative edge. And when Mr. Haggerty and I discussed this with Mr. Cogden, we want to get through the CIP process because that's sort of, time critical. And we probably want to start with, April, May-ish, a little bit of a brainstorming session, and then we'll take some of that brainstorming feedback to to deeper dive strategic planning. But just keep thinking, keep jotting notes of things that we want to be thinking about in the future. What should we be strategically looking at with respect to facilities for long-range planning? So that'll all be upcoming. And with that, I think that concludes the agenda. Thank you all for the presentations. Thank you, board colleagues, for good questions. And with that, the facilities meeting stands adjourned.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Douglas.
Great. Have a good night, all. Thank you.